What makes VR powerful for us is that we're putting you in the environment. You're the one having to make the choice in a real world scenario. The wild thing about VR is that it's gonna stay in there. It's gonna stay in your head because you were there.
That's Variable Labs Chief Technology Officer Dennis Bonilla. I'm your host, Lauren Goombas. This is episode 1 of From Blueprint to Solved, the podcast about reimagining different spaces. We'll discuss virtual reality and behavior correction, of course, the need that this is filling, and next steps. What's the story between empathy, AR, or augmented reality, and VR, or virtual reality? Dennis actually has kind of an incredible story. He started working with some filmmakers on a documentary called Clouds Over Sidra, and it's told in the perspective of a Syrian refugee. The girl's about 11, 12 years old in the documentary, and it's filmed at her eye level so that the audience is able to get her perspective. After this was filmed, the filmmakers decided to create Variable Labs, which is the company that Dennis is a part of. Basically, what they do is they create an app. They give this app to Fortune 500 companies. The companies are able to record different scenarios, and then they give these scenarios to their employees so their employees can watch those scenarios in virtual reality and make certain decisions within that environment.
The first project that I was able to work on with them was a salary negotiation simulation for the American Association of University Women. And that went to the White House, I believe, with the Department of Commerce to show off at the White House, and that got a lot of really great press. And really, what was interesting about that was merging um, decision-based interactivity with that empathy-driven narrative. Um, and so that's kind of how we got to combining those technologies, the VR, the interactive VR, and then the 360 VR. We've since then done what's called room scale so that you can actually walk around in the space and view stories from within a room scale environment, which is really, really interesting to me. And kind of a natural extension to that, once you have these models and you've got these environments built, it's a fairly straightforward jump to go from there to an augmented reality application. So right now we're experimenting with a platform that we've been working on to see how we can integrate some of our stuff into augmented reality. Our focus right now really is in VR, but you know because they're very much related, VR and AR. We kind of understand the technologies that bridge the two.
Virtual reality or VR is really about being immersed completely in a environment. And I really wanted to ask Dennis if he could really explain augmented reality a little bit more.
Like looking into a room and suddenly being provided a hologram or a trainer of some kind that walks you through some process. Uh, that's how we would use AR. We currently haven't integrated that into a project that's gone live, but we have the assets and we have the technology to be able to do that. So our focus has been on VR with the idea that our technology roadmap takes us through to AR.
Yeah, that would definitely make sense. AR, it sounds like you guys are still working towards that, but VR is it's such a potent tool. There's so many different applications for it. And there's so many ways to like create, really get other people's perspectives. You did mention, creating different documentaries for different groups like Syrian refugees. I was really interested in, the curriculums that you build for Google or the UN or some of your other clients. Do you guys create different environments for different tasks, or do you have certain models that you use frequently?
Right. So our focus has really been on what you would call soft skills training, and that's like kind of the emotional response to different interactions. So we've done difficult conversations involving negotiation and um, you know uh, peer-to-peer type of um, uh, internal communications within a company. We've also done things where external conversations around what happens when you have to tell a client that they can't afford what they're asking for, or that you've done everything that you can and that's as far as you can do in the schedule. Um, our stuff really is informed by curriculum subject matter experts that we hire and that we partner with. And through those partnerships, we're able to go to subject matter experts that have been working in that field, that understand the problems at hand, and that can assist us in integrating actual proven curriculum uh, into our VR environments. So far we've, for instance, this year we've done several. Each one has involved a different environment, and even ones where they're the same application. So, for instance, you're having an internal conversation with a group and then a conversation with an external group that may be in the same application. The environments are completely different. The offices look different. The interactions are different in VR. So yeah, we're, we're doing the best that we can to be sensitive to the types of conversations and then respecting those by building as informed interactivity as possible.
So what's the real need for different organizations? Like what do they usually come to you for? Which specific behaviors or soft skills do you think the workplace really needs worked on right now?
So, one, for instance, was a difficult conversation with an employee. Just to give you an example, an employee that might be showing up to work late, or that might not be paying attention during a meeting of some kind. Um, our One of the recent applications that we built was specifically around those kind of interactions. So imagine how uncomfortable it would be to tell someone, "Hey, listen, you got to think about being more engaged. You got to think about showing up on time." Um, and so what we do is we integrate the curriculum into the VR application, and it's like a choose your own adventure type of story in which the person might walk into the room. You're given some prep, of course, by a guide. And then the person walks into the room, and then you're speaking with them, and you're given choices. And that agency within the VR application is really kind of what defines what we're doing. That's being able to develop those kind of interactions in a narrative that encompasses different types of interactions. For instance, the interaction might be very nuanced. It may be the difference between saying, "I really don't appreciate how late you are," and you it would be great if you were a bit more thoughtful uh, about your timeliness. I mean, there are people here waiting for you for this particular meeting. Um, so that's kind of the way we're working out the integration of those curriculums into the headset.
What were some of your more successful experiences with these different curriculums? And were there like anywhere you were like, this is going to be a great learning experience, but this is something that didn't go as well? Did you have a really great experience with these curriculums and then maybe experience where you're like, we could have completely redesigned this, completely redone this?
Curriculums themselves, they've been worked on and developed for several, tens of years, and we end up writing scripts, and those scripts, often take about a month of planning or so, depending on the size of the experience. So there's a lot of planning that goes on before we integrate it into the technology. So the curriculum itself rarely kind of needs adjusting. I mean, it does, like any other curriculum, it does need to be updated every so often. But it's more about the tech, and it's more about how we might want to use the tech. Like, for instance, our experiences last anywhere from 7 to 15 minutes per playthrough. However, they often have several hours worth of content. So you play through it once, and where others might have said, "Oh, okay, well, that's really cool. Like, you did a multiple choice quiz or something to that effect." Well, that's not really what we're doing. We're trying to create actually something more like a simulation, so that when you've done it once, you have an opportunity to then go, "You know what? I want to try that in a completely different way." Oftentimes, we'll create 4, 5, 10 different endings to a particular set of paths, um, simply to show that very subtle changes in your interactions with other human beings can cause very different results. Um, so we're still learning. We're learning what are the best ways to improve a person's immersion in that experience. What are we doing with the environment itself? How are we filming it? How are we integrating 3D models into the experience? How do we integrate different choices? Those I think that we're kind of at the beginning of this still. Where we've been able to excel is we've been able to develop tools in house that allow us to rapidly create these kind of choose your own adventure applications. So what previously would have taken us 100 hours now takes us 2 hours to produce. And we can do it in a way that allows the content creators themselves to edit the experience rather than relying on a developer to do that.
With so many different technical aspects to AR and VR, what are some of the roadblocks?
So the headsets still are pretty clunky, right? They're still pretty big. They require a mobile phone to be slid into Google Daydream or Gear VR or any one of the Google cardboards, like the big plastic headsets. And them being mobile, they're not super powerful yet. So you can play back limited 3D. We can get quite a bit of video. Like I was saying, we can get several hours worth of video, but you still have overheating problems. You still have battery problems. If you're going to wear something over your face that you can call up at any time, the idea would be that it would work whenever you needed it. So now the device has to last somewhere between 8 to 10 hours a day. That's a whole other animal. And most people don't want to put a mobile phone on their face for 10 hours. They want something a little more attractive, a little cooler.
Dennis, what do you think? What would you say are some of your next steps, or what would be kind of like the next thing that you're doing from here?
What we're seeing, what one possible path is, of course, is just taking the content that we're already producing for virtual reality and bringing it into a real world space so that if you're in your office and you want to sit across from somebody and you're wearing a headset, um, you can call up the training and suddenly you're talking or you're interacting with a virtual guide, right? Like, I need help, right? I'm about to go into this really intense negotiation on X product. I kind of need to know how this has been done or how I might want to do this. Let's pull up a curriculum guide right now to talk me through that. You'd pull them up in augmented reality. You'd be able to interact with them, and they would say, "Well, okay, in this particular scenario, this is one strategy that has worked in the past, or these are ways to kind of find your path through the conversation with that particular client."
Great. Well, Dennis, I want to thank you so much for coming in and, well, actually not coming in because you're in Phoenix and I'm in Colorado, or sorry, you're in Tempe. He's near Phoenix. You're near Phoenix. You're near Phoenix and I'm in Golden, Colorado. So pretty close by. So thank you so much.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you. Thanks.
If you're interested in finding out more about Variable Labs, definitely check them out at variablelabs.com. And of course, follow them on Twitter as @variable_labs. Thank you guys for listening to episode 1 of From Blueprint to Solve, the podcast about reimagining different spaces to improve sustainability and, of course, human wellness. We have releases every Fridays, with the exception, of course, with this launch we had this weekend. We have a really great website that we just put up, so go ahead and look at that. Thank you guys for listening. Next Friday, we have sort of a follow-up episode about Variable Labs and really about how augmented reality and virtual reality can be used to reimagine different spaces and to improve human wellness and sustainability. Until next time.